It was a busy morning at the airport, and the terminal was filled with the usual buzz of travelers. People hurried to their gates, pulling their luggage behind them, checking their boarding passes, and chatting with friends or family. Among them was Maya, a young black girl of about 10 years old, holding tightly to her father's hand. Her father, Mr. Carter, was a tall, calm man with a stern face that didn't show much emotion. He had always been the kind of person who stayed quiet, observed everything around him, and didn't say much unless it was important. Today, he was focused on getting Maya to her seat, making sure she was comfortable, and making sure the journey would be smooth for her. They had just gone through security, and Maya had been a little nervous when the officers asked her to take off her shoes, but her dad had made it all better with a calm smile and a reassuring word. Now they were heading to Gate 24 for their flight to Washington, D.C., where they would visit Maya's aunt. She had been looking forward to this trip for weeks. She could already picture all the fun they would have together. The plane was small, but it was comfortable. As they entered the cabin, Maya's eyes lit up when she saw the window seats. "I get the window," she said excitedly, pulling her dad towards the front row. "Of course, sweetheart," Mr. Carter replied, his voice as steady as always. They found their seats, and Maya settled into the window seat, smiling as she looked outside at the planes on the runway. Mr. Carter sat beside her, taking a moment to adjust his jacket before looking at his daughter. He could see how excited she was, and that made the journey even more special for him. Maya was lost in her thoughts, staring out of the window as the other passengers boarded. Some people were rushing, while others took their time. The flight attendants smiled politely at everyone, offering help when needed. Maya noticed a woman walking down the aisle, her eyes scanning the seats. This woman, dressed in a fancy business suit and holding a large handbag, had a stern look on her face. As she walked past Maya and Mr. Carter, she gave them a quick glance, then turned around and looked again, her eyes narrowing. Something about the way she looked at them made Maya feel uncomfortable. She shifted in her seat, but her dad's calm presence made her feel a little better. Mr. Carter didn't notice the woman's stare at first. He was focused on checking the safety instructions in front of him. But Maya kept looking at the woman, who was now standing still in the aisle, as if waiting for something. The woman's eyes locked onto Maya's seat again, and then she turned to the flight attendant who was walking nearby. The woman spoke in a low, demanding voice. "Excuse me," she said sharply. "This seat isn't for them. They need to move." The flight attendant, a young woman with a friendly smile, turned and asked, "I'm sorry, ma'am, what do you mean? This is their assigned seat." "No, this seat is meant for me. I always sit in the front row, by the window. That's where I belong," the woman said, her voice cold and firm. "They need to get up and move. I have a business trip to attend." The flight attendant looked confused for a moment. She glanced at the boarding pass in her hand, then at Maya's ticket, and back at the woman. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but the seat is assigned to this young lady." Mr. Carter, still calm, glanced up from his magazine. He saw the exchange, but he didn't react immediately. He knew it was just a small misunderstanding, but the way the woman was speaking made him uneasy. Maya, sensing her dad's tension, looked up at him for reassurance. "Don't worry, sweetie," he said quietly, smiling at her. "Just stay calm, okay? I'll handle this." The woman, now standing firmly with her arms crossed, refused to move. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. "You're going to let a child take my seat. This is my seat. I demand to speak with the captain." The flight attendant tried to stay polite. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but you have been assigned another seat further back." The woman's face turned red with frustration. She shook her head in disbelief and pointed at Mr. Carter. "You, sir, need to control your child," she said, raising her voice. "This is completely unacceptable." Maya looked down at her lap, feeling embarrassed. She had never been in a situation like this before. She could tell that the woman's words were meant to hurt her, but she didn't know what to say. She just wanted to enjoy the flight, but now everything felt so awkward. Mr. Carter didn't let the woman's words affect him. He remained calm, but his eyes narrowed slightly. His quiet strength was something Maya had always admired. "Ma'am, if you don't mind, you should sit in your assigned seat. My daughter is not going anywhere," he said firmly. The woman's gaze sharpened as she realized Mr. Carter wasn't backing down. She opened her mouth to say something, but the flight attendant quickly stepped in again. "I'm going to have to call the captain, ma'am, if you don't take your seat." The woman hesitated for a moment, clearly realizing she wasn't going to win this battle easily, but she wasn't finished. As she moved towards the back of the plane, she shot one last glare at Mr. Carter and Maya. Maya couldn't help but feel uneasy as she watched the woman sit down a few rows behind them. What was all that about? She had no idea why the woman had acted that way. But one thing was certain. It wasn't just about the seat. The plane's engines roared as it slowly began to taxi down the runway. Maya, still shaken from the confrontation, stared out the window, trying to forget about the uncomfortable moment with the woman. She squeezed her dad's hand tightly, looking for comfort in his steady presence. Mr. Carter didn't seem worried. He wasn't even looking out the window. His eyes were fixed ahead, his face calm, as if everything was exactly as it should be. He always had a way of staying in control, no matter what was happening around him. Maya had learned it from him. "Is the plane going to be okay, Dad?" Maya asked softly, her voice trembling slightly. Mr. Carter smiled gently at her, his deep voice soothing. "Of course, sweetheart. It's perfectly safe. There's nothing to worry about." Maya nodded, trying to believe him. She always felt safe with her father. But something about the woman's rude demands kept nagging at her. Why had she acted like that? Maya had never been treated that way before. She had always been polite, always tried to make a good impression. But this woman hadn't even tried to be kind. She glanced over her shoulder and saw the woman again. Mrs. Simmons, as the flight attendant had called her. She was sitting a few rows behind them, still glaring at Mr. Carter and Maya. Maya could feel the tension in the air, as if something bigger was coming. Mrs. Simmons wasn't the kind of person to let something go so easily. The plane shook slightly as it lifted off the ground, and Maya pressed her face against the cool window, trying to distract herself. Her father had always told her to focus on the good things, to look for the positives. So she watched the city shrink beneath her, the buildings and streets becoming little dots in the distance. The sky was clear and bright blue, and it felt peaceful high above the clouds. But that peace didn't last long. Mrs. Simmons had clearly not given up. From her seat, she watched Mr. Carter and Maya closely. Her eyes narrowed, and her lips were pursed, like she was plotting something. Maya could feel her staring at the back of her head, and it made her uneasy. Mr. Carter noticed the woman's gaze as well. He didn't say anything, but Maya saw his hand tighten around the armrest. She didn't know why, but something told her that he wasn't going to let the woman get away with what she had done. The flight attendant came around with the drink cart, offering sodas, juice, and snacks. Mrs. Simmons was the first to speak up again. "Excuse me," she said sharply, stopping the flight attendant in her tracks. "I need to speak with the captain. Right now." The flight attendant looked surprised. "Is everything all right, Mom?" "I need to speak to him about the child in the front row," Mrs. Simmons said, her voice still loud and demanding. "I'm being treated unfairly, and I won't stand for it. This child has no business sitting in my seat." Maya felt her heart race. She didn't understand why the woman was making such a big deal about something so small. She had done nothing wrong. Her dad had done nothing wrong. Why was this happening? The flight attendant, now clearly uncomfortable, glanced toward Mr. Carter for guidance. He raised one eyebrow but said nothing. He was waiting, watching, letting the situation unfold. "Ma'am, the captain is quite busy with the flight," the flight attendant said, trying to remain calm. "Is there something else I can help with? I want that child to move, and I want it now," Mrs. Simmons demanded again, this time her voice growing louder. Her face was red with frustration, and she stood up from her seat, causing people around her to look nervously. "Please, Mom," the flight attendant said, taking a step back. "You need to return to your seat. I'll let you speak to the captain once we're airborne." "No," Mrs. Simmons snapped, her eyes flashing with anger. "This is ridiculous. I'm not moving until this gets fixed." At this, the other passengers started to notice. Some people shifted in their seats, others exchanged confused glances, and a few even started pulling out their phones. Maya could feel the weight of all those eyes on her, and it made her stomach turn. What was happening? Why was this woman so angry? Mr. Carter took a deep breath, the air around him growing tense. He stood up slowly, towering over the woman as she continued to yell. The entire cabin seemed to hold its breath. "Ma'am," he said quietly but firmly, "you're causing a scene. I suggest you take your seat, or I will take further action." The woman looked up at him in surprise. She had been so focused on Maya and her seat that she hadn't even noticed Mr. Carter standing behind her. "What did you just say?" Mrs. Simmons snapped, her eyes widening. "I said," Mr. Carter repeated calmly, "take your seat. This is not your fight. This is my daughter's seat, and you need to respect that." Maya couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her dad wasn't angry. He wasn't shouting. But there was something in his voice that made everyone in the cabin quiet down. No one dared to say anything. They all knew something important was about to happen. The woman opened her mouth, about to respond, but then she saw something in Mr. Carter's hand. It was small, but the badge was unmistakable. The woman's expression changed immediately from defiance to confusion. She stepped back, looking at the badge in disbelief. Who are you?" she stammered, her bravado gone. Mr. Carter didn't answer right away. He just held the badge out, his eyes never leaving hers. Maya looked up at her dad, unsure of what was happening. She had no idea what that badge meant, but the look in Mrs. Simmons' eyes told her everything. The woman's eyes widened in shock as she looked down at the badge Mr. Carter had shown her. For a moment, the entire plane seemed to hold its breath. The tension was thick in the air, and the hum of the engines filled the silence. What is that?" Mrs. Simmons stammered, her voice shaky now. She had been so sure of herself just a few minutes ago, but now she seemed unsure, her confidence disappearing. Mr. Carter didn't respond immediately. He held the badge in his hand, steady and calm. The golden letters on the badge were clear, FBI. He took a slow step closer to Mrs. Simmons, and the look in his eyes was unwavering. "I'm Special Agent Carter, and I suggest you take your seat, Mom," he said, his voice low but firm. Mrs. Simmons looked at him, her mouth opening and closing as if she were trying to find the right words. Her earlier anger had faded, replaced by a deep uncertainty. She quickly glanced around the cabin, hoping someone would come to her defense, but the passengers were all watching her now, silent and curious. Maya, who had been sitting quietly beside her father, felt her heart race. She had no idea her dad was an FBI agent. It had always been just the two of them, and he had never mentioned anything like this before. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with questions, but Mr. Carter didn't look down at her. His focus was entirely on Mrs. Simmons. You're an agent?" Mrs. Simmons finally asked, her voice trembling. She had gone pale, her earlier arrogance completely gone. "But why didn't you say anything earlier? You should have told me. This changes everything." Mr. Carter didn't respond. He simply kept the badge in his hand, his eyes never leaving Mrs. Simmons. The woman was clearly panicking now, looking around as if she were trying to escape the situation she had gotten herself into. "Look," she said, her voice cracking. "I was just trying to get to my destination. I've been traveling all day. I didn't mean any harm, okay? But this child shouldn't be sitting in that seat. It's my seat." Mr. Carter's expression remained unchanged. He had heard enough. "Your seat," he repeated calmly. "Ma'am, you're sitting in the seat that was assigned to you, and my daughter has done nothing wrong. She's not moving from this seat." Mrs. Simmons opened her mouth, but no words came out. She was clearly trying to figure out what to do next. She looked like she had been caught in a lie, and now there was nowhere to turn. Her earlier confidence was shattered, and she had no idea how to get out of this situation. I didn't mean to cause trouble," Mrs. Simmons said, her voice now barely a whisper. I don't know what happened. I didn't realize who you were. I was wrong." Mr. Carter finally lowered the badge and slipped it back into his pocket, his gaze still steady. "It's not just about the seat, ma'am. It's about respect. We all have our assigned places, and we all deserve respect, no matter who we are. You need to think about that." Maya watched her father closely, still trying to process what was happening. She had always known her dad was strong, but this was different. She never expected him to be so calm and collected in a situation like this. It was as if he was always in control, no matter what. The woman's face flushed bright red as she sank back into her seat, her hands shaking. She looked around again, but now no one was paying attention to her. The tension in the air had started to lift. The other passengers, who had been watching the scene unfold, went back to their own conversations or pulled out books and tablets. The flight attendants, who had been standing by nervously, now moved on, doing their jobs like nothing had happened. Maya couldn't believe what she had just witnessed. Her dad had handled everything so calmly, and now everything seemed back to normal, as if nothing had happened at all. But she knew better. She knew that the woman had caused a scene, and her dad had put an end to it without raising his voice. "Are you okay, sweetie?" Mr. Carter asked, turning to Maya with a soft smile. He reached over and patted her hand gently. Maya nodded, but she couldn't stop the questions from flooding her mind. "Dad, are you really an FBI agent?" Mr. Carter smiled and leaned back in his seat. He glanced around the cabin, making sure no one was paying too much attention to them. "Yes, I am, but don't worry about it. It's just something I do. I keep things quiet because that's how it's supposed to be." Maya blinked, trying to process it all. "But why didn't you tell me before?" Mr. Carter chuckled softly. "I didn't think you needed to know. Your mom and I agreed that you'd have a normal life, and that's what I wanted for you." Maya felt a wave of understanding wash over her. Her father had always been so quiet, so mysterious, but it wasn't because he didn't care. It was because he was protecting her. He wanted her to have a normal childhood, away from the dangerous and unpredictable world of his work. But this moment, this strange and tense situation, had changed everything. She could see now how much her dad truly cared about her and how far he would go to keep her safe. For the rest of the flight, Maya sat quietly beside her father, still trying to absorb the reality of what had just happened. Mrs. Simmons didn't say another word to them, and she remained silent for the rest of the journey, avoiding eye contact with Mr. Carter. The rest of the flight passed in relative silence. Maya was still trying to wrap her head around everything that had happened. Her father, an FBI agent. It didn't seem real. He had always been so calm, so normal, and now the truth had been revealed in the most unexpected way. Maya glanced at her dad, who was looking out the window, lost in his thoughts. He was so focused, so calm, that it almost made her feel at ease again. But deep down, she was still rattled. The image of Mrs. Simmons' angry face and the way her father had handled her so easily kept playing in her mind. Her thoughts were interrupted when the flight attendants made their final rounds, preparing for landing. The seatbelt sign lit up, and passengers began to buckle up, settling into their seats for the descent. Maya tightened her seatbelt, glancing around at the other passengers. Most of them seemed to have forgotten about the scene that had unfolded earlier, returning to their own worlds. But she noticed that a few people were still sneaking glances at her and her father. The tension was still in the air, but it was quieter now, almost as if everyone was pretending it hadn't happened. Mr. Carter finally turned toward Maya, breaking the silence. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. "You've been quiet." Maya nodded, but there was a question in her eyes. "Dad, why didn't you tell me? I mean, you're an FBI agent. I had no idea." Mr. Carter smiled, but it wasn't his usual smile. It was softer, almost like he was trying to protect her from something. "It's complicated, Maya. There's a lot I've had to keep secret, and I never wanted you to feel different because of it. But," Maya hesitated, "why did you tell that woman who you were? You could have just let her be rude and ignored it." Mr. Carter's eyes darkened for a moment, his expression serious. "Sometimes people think they can treat others however they want. When that happens, I step in. Especially when it involves you. No one should make you feel less than. Do you understand?" Maya nodded slowly, her mind racing. She understood what he was saying, but it didn't make sense. Why had Mrs. Simmons acted that way in the first place? She couldn't just be upset over a seat. There had to be something more to it. And why had her dad been so calm throughout the whole thing? The plane began its descent, the city skyline growing larger in the distance. The view from the window was breathtaking, the buildings towering against the bright blue sky. But Maya didn't feel the usual excitement she did when landing. Instead, a heavy feeling sat in her stomach. She couldn't stop thinking about the woman and the way she had acted. It was clear now that something was off about her. But what? Her dad seemed to read her thoughts. "Maya, I need you to stay focused on the present, okay? Whatever happens when we land, we'll handle it. Don't let anyone else's actions ruin your peace." Maya nodded, trying to shake off the unease that had settled inside her. She wanted to trust her dad. She wanted to believe that everything was going to be okay. But she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Mrs. Simmons than met the eye. As the plane touched down and taxied toward the gate, the passengers started to gather their things, preparing to disembark. Maya followed her dad as they stood up, grabbing their bags from the overhead compartment. She looked around at the other passengers, noticing the way some of them glanced at her father with a mix of curiosity and respect. It was as if they had all just learned something new about him, even though he had never once revealed anything about himself. When the plane finally came to a full stop, the passengers began to exit the cabin one by one. Mrs. Simmons was nowhere to be seen. Maya was relieved. She had hoped the woman would just disappear, but deep down, she knew it wasn't over yet. "Dad, do you think she's going to do anything?" Maya asked, her voice low. She didn't want to make a scene, but she had to know. Mr. Carter's eyes scanned the cabin, and he stood still for a moment before answering. "We'll see. I don't think she'll cause trouble now, but people like her often have a way of stirring things up." As they walked toward the exit, Maya could see the security officers standing near the door. They looked like they were waiting for someone. Her heart skipped a beat when she noticed that one of the officers was talking to a flight attendant, pointing toward the back of the plane. Maya's heart raced as she and her father walked down the aisle of the plane. She could still hear Mrs. Simmons shouting behind them, her voice growing louder with each passing second. It felt like the world around them was moving in slow motion. The other passengers were starting to look around, some of them whispering to each other, but no one dared to speak up. As they approached the exit, Maya couldn't help but glance over her shoulder again. Mrs. Simmons was still arguing with the security officers, her face bright red and twisted with anger. The officers were trying to calm her down, but Maya could tell it wasn't working. Mrs. Simmons was determined to make a scene. Her father didn't seem fazed by it at all. He kept walking, his pace steady and calm. But Maya could see the tension in his jaw, the way his eyes scanned the room. He was prepared for whatever was about to happen, but Maya had no idea what was coming next. They reached the door, and Maya was almost relieved when she stepped off the plane. The bright lights of the airport terminal hit her like a wave. The noise, the crowd, everything felt overwhelming. But just as they were about to step into the main area, a voice called out to them. "Special Agent Carter," a man shouted. Maya's stomach dropped. She looked around and saw a group of airport security officers standing at the entrance, blocking their way. Mrs. Simmons was standing off to the side, still fuming, pointing at her father. "That's him," Mrs. Simmons shouted, her voice sharp. "That man is a threat. He's lying about who he is." The officers exchanged glances, and one of them stepped forward. "Special Agent Carter, we need to speak with you." Maya's father didn't flinch. He stood tall, his gaze steady. "I'm not going anywhere," he said calmly, his voice firm. "I don't have time for this nonsense. I suggest you get her under control." The officers looked at each other, uncertain. They clearly didn't know what to do. One of them stepped closer to Mrs. Simmons and spoke quietly to her, trying to calm her down. But she was too far gone, her emotions running high. "You don't understand." Mrs. Simmons was practically crying now. "That man is dangerous. He's not an agent. He's a criminal. I know it." Maya's father finally turned to face the officers, his expression unreadable. "You want to question me?" he asked, his tone still calm but now carrying a weight of authority. "Go ahead, but you'll be wasting your time. I've already told you who I am." The officer who had spoken earlier seemed to hesitate, glancing back at his colleagues. Maya could see that they were unsure about how to handle the situation. They didn't want to escalate things, but they also didn't want to ignore a potential threat. Maya felt the tension in the air, the uncertainty hanging around them like a thick fog. She looked up at her father, but he wasn't looking at her. His focus was entirely on the officers and Mrs. Simmons. It was clear that he was used to handling situations like this, but Maya couldn't shake the feeling that things were getting worse. "Listen," Mr. Carter said after a long pause. "You can either waste time listening to her, or you can check the records yourself. I've been an agent for over 20 years. My credentials are legitimate. I don't have time to stand here while you waste my time." The officers looked at each other again, but this time they didn't hesitate. One of them pulled out a phone and began typing quickly, likely looking up Mr. Carter's information. Maya stood there, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt like she was caught in the middle of a storm, unsure of what was going to happen next. Finally, the officer with the phone looked up at Mr. Carter. "You're clear, sir. We verified your credentials." He nodded at the other officers, signaling them to step aside. Maya let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. It was over. For now, at least. But Mrs. Simmons wasn't done yet. She stepped forward, her face twisted in anger. "This isn't over," she yelled. "You can't just walk away. This man is a fraud, and I will make sure everyone knows it." Maya and her father, Agent Carter, walked through the busy terminal, the noise of the crowd around them barely registering. Maya's mind was racing. Mrs. Simmons was not just some angry passenger. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that something bigger was at play. Her father had been calm throughout the entire situation, but Maya could see that he was troubled. He didn't let it show on his face, but she knew him too well. Something was wrong. They reached the baggage claim area, and her father stopped suddenly, turning to face her. His eyes were intense, sharp, as if he had just made a decision. Maya felt a chill run through her. She had never seen him like this before. "Maya," he said, his voice low and serious. "There's something I need to tell you. It's important." Maya's stomach dropped. She had always trusted her father, but now, a wave of anxiety hit her. Whatever he was about to say, it wasn't going to be easy. "Dad, what is it?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "What's going on? Who was Mrs. Simmons? Why is she acting like this?" Her father sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. "Mrs. Simmons is not who she seems, Maya, and the situation we just went through was no accident." Maya's mind was spinning. She had so many questions, but she didn't know where to start. "What do you mean?" "She's just a crazy woman who got mad over a seat." Agent Carter shook his head. "No, Mrs. Simmons isn't just a random passenger. She's part of something much bigger, and she's been watching us for a while." Maya's heart skipped a beat. "Watching us? Why? What does she want with you?" I don't know everything yet, he replied, his eyes scanning the terminal as if looking for any sign of danger. But I have a feeling she's been assigned to target me, or maybe even you, and she's not working alone. Maya felt the air in her lungs grow thin. What? Why would anyone want to hurt us? You're just an FBI agent. You're good at your job. Her father looked at her, his face darkening. I'm more than just an agent, Maya. I've been involved in cases that I haven't told you about. Dangerous people, dangerous organizations, things that I've kept from you for your own safety. The words felt like a punch to the stomach. Maya had always known her father was involved in important work, but she never imagined it was this serious. And now, to know that they were being targeted, it was like her whole world was turning upside down. I don't understand, Maya whispered, her voice small. What's going on? Who's after us? Agent Carter looked around again, ensuring no one was listening, before pulling her to a quieter part of the terminal. They stood near a row of empty seats, and for the first time in a long time, her father looked vulnerable. Maya had never seen him like this. It was like a wall had come down, and she was seeing the truth behind the calm, collected man he usually was. There's a criminal organization, Maya, he said quietly, an international one. They've been operating in the shadows for years, and I've been investigating them for a long time. But they're smart, and they've made sure to cover their tracks. Mrs. Simmons isn't just some random person. She's part of a much larger operation. Maya's eyes widened as she took in his words. Wait, you're saying that she's part of a criminal group? How is she involved? Her father exhaled, rubbing his temple. I believe she's been sent to spy on me. I think she's trying to gather information about me, about you, maybe about the cases I've been working on. And I don't think she's the only one. Maya swallowed hard. But why now? Why would they go to all this trouble? What do they want? That's what I need to figure out, he said. But it's not just about me. They're trying to get to something bigger, something I've been protecting for years. And I think Mrs. Simmons might know something about it. Maya stared at him, her mind still trying to make sense of what he was saying. What could be so important that they would go after you, and me? Agent Carter looked around again, his voice even lower now. I can't say much yet, but let me put it this way. There's something I've been working on for years, something that could change everything. If it falls into the wrong hands, it could destroy everything. Maya felt a chill wash over her. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her father was involved in something much bigger than she had ever known. And now, they were in danger because of it. I wish I could tell you more, Maya, her father continued. But right now, we have to focus on staying safe. We need to move carefully from here on out. If they know I'm onto them, they'll come after us harder. You have to trust me. Maya nodded, but the fear in her heart wasn't going away. She had trusted her father her whole life, but now the stakes were higher than ever. There were people out there who wanted to hurt them, and she didn't know who they were or what they were capable of. As they stood there, taking in the weight of the situation, a sudden thought crossed Maya's mind. What about Mrs. Simmons? She won't just let this go. She's going to keep trying, isn't she? Her father's jaw tightened. Yes, but we'll be ready. I've been through worse. We'll handle it. Just stay close, and don't trust anyone but me, okay? Maya nodded, but the unease gnawing at her wouldn't fade. They had entered a world of danger she had never imagined, and it was clear that things were about to get much more complicated. Suddenly, Maya felt a hand on her shoulder, and she spun around, her heart leaping in her chest. A familiar voice spoke behind her. The two men in suits approached them with measured steps, their expressions serious and unreadable. Maya stood close to her father, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never seen him this tense before. These men were not regular officials. There was something about them that screamed danger. Her father's eyes narrowed, but he remained calm. What do you know about Mrs. Simmons? He asked, his voice low and controlled. One of the men stepped forward. He was tall, with sharp features and dark sunglasses that didn't seem to match the indoor setting. His voice was cold, like someone who had seen too much to be surprised by anything. "We know everything, Agent Carter. Mrs. Simmons is part of a network, an underground operation that's been working within the country for years. She's not just some random passenger." Maya's heart raced as the man's words sank in. "What do you mean, not just a random passenger?" she asked, her voice trembling. The second man, who was shorter and slightly older, spoke up. His voice was gruff, like he wasn't used to speaking much. "She's been planting people in key positions, trying to find out who's working on certain high-level cases. She's been tracking you, Agent Carter. She knows more than you think." Maya's father stiffened. He didn't show it, but she could tell the revelation hit him hard. "And why didn't you tell me this sooner?" he asked, his eyes flashing with frustration. "We were monitoring her, but she was careful," the taller man explained. "She knew we were on her tail, so she played it smart, kept moving under the radar. It wasn't until she got close to you on the flight that we realized you might be her next target." Maya felt a chill settle in her chest. Her father had been targeted because of his work, and now they were caught in the middle of something much bigger than they had ever imagined. She couldn't believe this was happening to them. "So, you're telling me she was following me all along?" her father asked, his voice strained. "What else does she know?" The second man, the older one, stepped forward and handed her father a folder. "We've been investigating her for months. She's been getting too close to the people we've been monitoring. She was trying to find out the location of something very important." Maya's father took the folder, his hand steady despite the growing tension. He opened it slowly, scanning the contents with a look of disbelief crossing his face. Maya couldn't see what was in it, but her father's reaction said everything. This can't be possible," he muttered under his breath. His eyes lifted to meet the men's. "Are you telling me she knew about the data?" The men exchanged a brief look before the older one answered, his voice quiet but firm. "Yes, she knows about it. She's been trying to find out everything she can. If she gets her hands on it, it will change the course of everything we've been working on." Maya's confusion deepened. What's in this data? What could be so important that someone would go to all this trouble to find it? Her father looked at her, his eyes hardening as he tried to mask the fear that flickered beneath his calm exterior. "Maya, this data is connected to a case I've been working on for years. It's the key to bringing down the criminal organization that's been operating in the shadows for far too long. If they get it, they'll be able to control everything we've worked so hard to protect." Maya's mind was racing. She had no idea that her father's work was so dangerous, that it involved so much more than she had ever known. And now she understood why Mrs. Simmons had been so determined to cause trouble on the plane. "We have to stop her," Maya said, her voice sharp with urgency. Her father didn't answer immediately. He looked at the two men in suits, his face still set in stone. "How did you find out about this?" he asked. The taller man stepped forward, his expression hard. "We've been tracking Mrs. Simmons for months. She was working with a group inside the country that has been infiltrating key positions. They were planning to intercept the data. We needed to stop her before she could get her hands on it." Maya felt a wave of fear wash over her. They had been right under their noses the whole time. This whole situation, Mrs. Simmons, the confrontation on the plane, the people in the terminal, it was all connected to something much darker. Her father closed the folder with a snap, his eyes hardening. "Then we need to move fast. If she's already got information, we don't have much time." The two men nodded. "We've already taken steps to track her. We know where she's headed, but we'll need your help to get ahead of her. We need you to help us get to the data before she does." Maya's father didn't hesitate. "Of course," he said, his voice steady again. "We'll do whatever it takes." The taller man handed over a small, unmarked device to Agent Carter. "This will help you track the data. It's a secure connection. No one can trace it back to us. We've been monitoring the location of the data for a while, but we need your expertise to make sure it stays safe." Maya felt a cold shiver run through her. Everything was happening so fast. Her father had always been the protector, the strong one. But now, she could see the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. They were in the middle of a fight they hadn't planned for, and the stakes were higher than she could have imagined. The flight to the secured location was long and silent. Maya could feel the weight of the situation pressing on her shoulders, heavier with every passing mile. Her father, Agent Carter, was unusually quiet, his mind clearly focused on the task ahead. Maya wanted to ask more questions, but she understood the urgency of the situation. Time was running out, and they had to stop Mrs. Simmons and her associates before they could cause any more damage. When they landed, the men in suits who had helped them earlier were already waiting, their faces grim. "We've tracked Simmons," the taller one reported. "She's on her way to the last known location of the data. We can't afford to waste any more time." Agent Carter nodded sharply. "Let's move. We can't let her reach the data first. Get your teams in position." As they sped toward the location, Maya could feel the tension in the air. It wasn't just the knowledge that they were chasing after dangerous criminals. It was the realization that their lives had just taken a turn into a world they didn't fully understand. Her father's job had always been secretive, but now it felt like it was consuming them, threatening to tear apart the life they once knew. They arrived at a secure building, a large, unmarked warehouse hidden on the outskirts of the city. The air was thick with anticipation, and Maya could feel the adrenaline surging through her veins. They were close now, closer than ever to the truth that could change everything. "We'll split up," Agent Carter said, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "Maya, stay close to me. If anything happens, you stick to the plan. No heroics." Maya didn't respond. She didn't need to. She had no intention of sitting on the sidelines anymore. This was her fight too. If her father was going to risk everything, then so was she. They had already lost too much. She wasn't about to lose her father or allow the people who were after them to win. As they entered the warehouse, the atmosphere shifted. The space was dimly lit, and the sound of their footsteps echoed off the metal walls. Maya could hear her own heartbeat thumping in her ears, each beat matching the rhythm of her steps. Her father's face was set in determination, his hand resting on the holster of his weapon. They approached a door at the far end of the warehouse, but before they could reach it, they heard voices from the other side. Maya's heart skipped a beat. It was Mrs. Simmons, and she wasn't alone. Agent Carter motioned for silence, signaling to the men behind him to take positions. He slowly eased the door open, and Maya peeked inside. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. In the center of the room stood Mrs. Simmons, her posture rigid as she spoke with two other individuals, men whom Maya didn't recognize. The air between them was thick with tension. Maya knew they were discussing the data, the very thing her father had been trying to protect, the information that could destroy everything if it fell into the wrong hands. "This is it," her father whispered. "We need to move quickly." He signaled to the others, and they began to move into position. But just as they were about to storm the room, Maya heard a sound that made her blood run cold. A gunshot. A sharp, deafening crack that echoed through the warehouse, followed by a shout. "Don't move." Maya froze, her eyes wide with fear. Mrs. Simmons had been ready for them. The trap had been set. Before anyone could react, several armed men burst from the shadows, surrounding them. "Maya," her father shouted, pushing her behind him. "Get down." The situation had gone from bad to worse. The men in suits tried to fight back, but they were outnumbered. The criminals were armed, and they knew the terrain better than anyone. Maya's heart raced as she watched her father struggle to maintain control of the situation. Just when it seemed like everything was lost, a voice rang out from the shadows. "Enough." The room fell silent, and everyone turned to see a man stepping forward from the darkness. He was tall, wearing a black suit with a confident stride that made him seem almost untouchable. He wasn't alone. Two other men flanked him, both with weapons drawn. "Mr. Carter," the man said, his voice calm but laced with a dangerous edge. You should have stayed out of this. Maya's heart stopped. The man in front of them wasn't just any criminal. This was the leader of the organization, someone her father had been hunting for years. The person behind all the chaos. Her father's expression darkened. You've been pulling the strings this whole time, haven't you, Weaver? The man, Weaver, smiled coldly. You're too late. The data will be mine. And now, I think it's time we finish this. With a sudden motion, he raised his gun, aiming directly at Maya. Time seemed to slow as her father lunged forward, pushing her out of the way just as the shot was fired. The bullet missed, but her father was grazed on his shoulder. Maya screamed in panic, rushing to his side. Dad, she cried, her voice shaking with fear. Her father gritted his teeth, clutching his shoulder but refusing to fall. Stay back, Maya, he ordered, his voice strained. He grabbed his gun and aimed it at Weaver. I won't let you take it. Not now, not ever, he growled. The tension in the room was unbearable. The air was thick with the promise of violence. Maya's eyes darted around, looking for any way out. She knew they were close to the end, one way or another. Suddenly, the sound of sirens echoed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Reinforcements had arrived. It was too late for the criminals to escape.